In the history of the left, one continent is always going to find its mention: Latin America. The continent has etched a permanent mark. From the iron hand communism of Fidel Castro to the chavismo socialism of Hugo Chavez, Latin America has seen its fair share of political turmoil. Not to forget the cultural iconoclast Che Guevara, who continues to be important several years after his death. Indeed, the left has always found a political space in Latin America. It did go through a crisis during a string of military coups and dictatorships, but the pink tide took over the continent from 1990s to 2010. Though the wave was again disrupted a few years back, now the tide has been resurrected. Western media in the last few months has reported that the pink tide has again taken over the continent, but we beg to differ. The left in Latin America is not the left which Western media thinks it to be. Hi and welcome to TFIGlobal, the foreign affairs and geopolitical analysis arm of the TFI Media Group. I am your host Atul Mishra. Let's begin. On the first day of 2023, Latin America's 6 most significant economies were under the control of left-wing leaders. Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva was the latest to take office on January 1st. He joined Andrés Manuel López Obrador of Mexico, Alberto Fernández in Argentina, Gabriel Boric in Chile, Gustavo Petro in Colombia, and Dina Boluarte in Peru. Each of these leaders took over from a predecessor who had a more conservative or centrist outlook. However, the Latin left is poles apart from the Western left. Between the late 1990s and the early 2010s, Latin America witnessed a massive left wave. It happened in Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil, Ecuador, and Venezuela. The region's first leader of the pink tide was Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez, who was elected in 1999. This was followed by Brazilian President Lula in 2002. For years, the countries ruled by left-wing governments experienced high approval ratings. They opposed imperialist nations, including the United States, propelled by high commodity prices and China's demand for raw materials. However, during the 2010s, the pink tide declined as the people turned away from populism. This resulted in the downfall of several left governments and the emergence of more conservative pro-business politics. Thus, this shift to the left is primarily a result of economic dissatisfaction, not the re-emergence of conservatism. The current tide is far different from the previous one. The 4 most recent leaders were chosen during a period of increasing economic instability. The COVID-19 pandemic and Russia's invasion of Ukraine resulted in higher inflation and unemployment levels in Latin America. The approval ratings of leftist leaders today are not as high as they were during the pink tide. This has caused a lot of political upheaval in some countries. In stark contrast to their predecessors, modern leftist leaders have seen their approval ratings plummet shortly after taking office. It was due to their failure to swiftly implement promised reforms and sustain high levels of welfare spending during an international economic crisis. To sum up, they failed miserably at delivering their promises. Chilean President Boric's rating is currently hovering around 33%. Argentine President Fernández has an even lower rating of 7.9%, as his own coalition started to contemplate putting forward another candidate in the 2023 general election. In addition, the current leftist leaders are not as influential as their predecessors and have had difficulty obtaining the same amount of backing from the public. Even Lula won the elections against Bolsonaro by a narrow margin of 1.8%, which was the closest in Brazil's history. The recent shift to the left in Latin America is mostly caused by a hostile atmosphere against the current leaders, which emerged from the economy's high instability. To put it simply, people are choosing their government representatives based on their displeasure with the current elites who have not been able to make life any better, rather than focusing on which political party the candidates come from. The disappointment of Latin American citizens with their government's inability to deliver results, combined with the rejection of political elites, has created an environment in which far-right ideologies have gained popularity. This was exemplified in 2018 when Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro was elected with a massive anti-establishment politics. Over the course of his term, Bolsonaro's approval remained strong. It was demonstrated by the riots that broke out following his narrow defeat in the 2022 election. These events demonstrate that right ideology continues to be appealing to many Latin American citizens. Right-wing politics has still not been uprooted from the region. Other South American countries have experienced the ascendance of right-wing leaders such as Argentina's Javier Milei, Chile's ex-presidential nominee Jose Antonio Cast, and Colombia's one-time presidential candidate Rodolfo Hernandez. These figures have earned backing through addressing issues like immigration and abortion, although a few, like Ecuador's Lasso, have mainly focused on economic matters. In Ecuador's February 2021 presidential election, the right-wing banker Guillermo Lasso beat the populist candidate Andres Ros. The Chilean President Boric has even vowed to bury neoliberalism. That's not very leftist of him. Despite the re-emergence of the left in Latin America, governments may not be able to capitalize on the chance to strengthen their economic and trade connections with each other because of protectionist trade practices and the emphasis on domestic issues. Chile, Colombia, Mexico, and Peru, meanwhile, are in favor of increasing the government's role in the economy. Additionally, all three countries, Chile, Colombia, and Peru, are impeded by domestic issues, such as Chile's work on a new constitution, Colombia striving for peace with insurgent forces, and Peru's current unrest over the former ex-president's removal from office. This pink tide in Latin America is likely to be temporary, since the shift to the left is a result of dissatisfaction with economic performance. There could be some collaboration on climate change or security measures, though most of the region's cooperation will likely take the form of diplomatic meetings and photo ops for presidents. Governments will likely be voted out if they are unable to improve economic conditions. The current period of convergence is unlikely to last for long.